Hi, Kathryn. How have you been?
Very well, thank you, Janet. How are you?
I have been good, busy, but I think all of us are actually looking forward to actually the opening of the economy.
Yeah,
So thank you and welcome to come on this series to share your experience.
thank you for having me.
No problem. So before we begin, let me just inform the audience might be in the series already. Today we have Miss Kathryn Woof with us to share on the topic on skill sets relevant for the future. She will also be talking a little bit about emotional resilience during the episode premiere. So we'll play this at exactly 2 p.m. And for now, maybe what we'll do is actually have a chat with Kathryn since the interview itself, I think it's not too long ago. It was probably 2 to 3 weeks ago where I interviewed you. But I think that you mentioned earlier before we went live, there has been quite a bit of changes, and these are positive changes. So maybe you would like to share a little bit more, Kat?
Yeah, sure. 2 weeks is a long time, isn't it? At the moment, it's amazing how different the world can be 2 weeks later since we recorded this. So, what we've really been noticing in our business is that there are quite a lot of green shoots coming up at the moment in the recruitment business. So, the HR and coaching business has tended to be quite busy through this circuit breaker and onwards. But the recruitment business had got very quiet. So people were not hiring new staff. And what we've noticed now is quite noticeably in the last couple of weeks is quite a lot of people are starting to call up and talk to us about how their business has been. So one of the first things that they wanted to talk to us about is, so this is how we are. The last few months have been like this, and here's the things that we did, and here's the position that we're in now. So they sort of want to tell their story, but the conclusion to that is, and we are now looking to hire. Because in their cases, they've tended to do quite well, actually. And now that we're out of the circuit breaker and we're into phase 2, they say, you know what, like we don't need to be quite so cautious anymore. We've actually managed to cope quite well, and we've got some growing to do.
That's great. So I think you also mentioned and shared about how a business pivoted. I think originally they were doing more B2B, and then through this they were pivoted to B2C, and they are actually year-on-year revenue has gone over that of previous year
Yeah.
as well.
Brilliant story. So they've gone from having their original business, which completely failed to be able to operate in the lockdown, so they pivoted and created a B2C version of that business, which they did very well. And now the B2B has just opened up again, because this is an F&B business, opened up again, last week. And so now they have two businesses. So they've called me up and said, we need to hire 10 people because we have a whole business line which we've created, which needs to be serviced. And it's just as big as our original business. So yeah, that's a really nice story to be able to share.
That's interesting. Now, because of this, right, the pivoting from B2B to B2C, do your clients come and tell you because of the digital transformation journey itself that they are able to actually expand in terms of their outreach to even more markets?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that with a few companies actually, is that they've started to do things online, and even for ourselves, a lot of people used to prefer our training and coaching face to face. And as much as we said, oh, we could do it on Zoom if you want. If you don't want to travel to the office, I'm happy to do a coaching session online. But people have always said, no, I definitely want to do it face to face. So obviously that option got taken away from us. So we've carried on selling coaching and training online. And now the companies are loving that. So what we've noticed ourselves is we've started to now work with companies in Hong Kong because everyone's just so used to it. It doesn't really matter. It's the same time zone. And that's what I have definitely noticed with our clients as well, is they've basically had a really quick digital transformation, and now some of their products or services are available online in a way that they weren't before.
Right. Now, then I'd like to ask you would be, because I think in the episode premiere, you did talk about some of the skill sets, but I'd like to just check with you in terms of someone who has gone through, like the Singapore government is encouraging people to look at going for digital skills, upskilling themselves and all those. When you're helping the employers hire these digital marketers, right? What kind of experience are they looking for besides just attending a class itself?
Yeah, I think that if you're a graduate, then coming from a relevant degree is usually something that gets looked for. But if you're a mid-career switcher, then they're looking at those kind of skills which sort of count across different industries or skill sets, like project management, teamwork, bringing something in on budget, innovative thinking, critical thinking, critical analysis. Like, all of these skills are so useful across lots of different jobs. So at the end of the day, a lot of that just comes across as someone's persona. So when they walk into the interview, they're obviously quite sort of good at presenting a topic and communicating well, and sort of critically thinking their way through something to come up with the solution. Like, often that comes across just in their persona because of the stories that they tell or the way that they present information. So, even if you've only just trained in the skill of digital marketing, if you were using all of those kind of skills in your last job, then they are still sort of very much in the job spec of your new job too.
Oh, interesting. So it's not necessary that you have to actually have lots of practical experience in digital marketing. What some of the employers are actually looking for are your cross-industry skills, like project management, like what you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, some of the digital skills are quite niche, and if you've not done that before, you may still have to start at a junior level, because there's just some learning to do. There's some learning to be done about working in that particular area of digital marketing, search engine optimization. I mean, you can't just do that when you've not been in that job. You have to learn how to do it. It's quite mathematical, actually. Spreadsheets, maths, like how to sort of get the most out of your marketing spend online. So yeah, you might still have to start more junior, but I tend to find these industries are pretty meritocratic. So you might be picking up the skill itself, but if you're really good at the teamwork bit and the project management and like handling clients or handling a problem, then you will get promoted pretty quickly, because actually these kind of skills are in such hot demand that if your own employer doesn't promote you, people just look for another job, and they get one like that. So there is there's quite a rapid ability to be promoted if you're good. And so what I would say as a mid-career switcher is you don't have to move up the channel at the same speed as a graduate who's never worked in an office before. You've got all of these additional skills, which is going to help you get promoted more quickly. But you do have to be good at the core skill itself. In this example, search engine optimization, I mean, you have to be good at that, but all those extra skills are probably going to make you even better at it.
Right. We have 1 minute left, but I'm looking forward to actually asking you more questions on, like, maybe you can think about it during the episode premiere itself, would be, how do you see actually the structure in terms of hierarchy change since you've been in the recruitment industry for some time, like right at the beginning and now, especially when we're looking at the cross-functional ability of digital teams and widespread and virtual working. So we'll come back to this question a little later. It's exactly at 2. So Kathryn, I'll hide you for a little while, and then I will show your episode premiere before we come back to you.
Great. See you soon.
See you soon. Hi. Welcome to the Leadership During Crisis Online Summit series. Thank you for taking your time to watch these episodes. Please remember to subscribe at our YouTube channel. Follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook under Leadership During Crisis. How has the HR recruitment landscape changed since the onset of COVID-19?
There has been a massive sort of lessening of recruitment in the market. So if you look at the data on how many jobs are available through sources like LinkedIn, you can see that there are less vacancies to apply for. However, there are some occasions when a company would still need to recruit. So obviously, if an important member of staff moves on, then that role would need to be replaced. We've also seen a bit of growth. So for some businesses, they have had strategic plans to pivot their business or grow in a certain direction. And that's actually still an important strategy for them. Just got off the phone this afternoon to a client whose structure has kept them relatively untouched by the turbulence of the last few months. They happen to do quite a bit of work into the tech sector. They happen to have diversified their business into more of an integrated offering. So they basically become a little bit more recession proof because they've got lots of touch points as to how revenue comes in.
You mentioned that a lot of them are pivoting and maybe looking at some new skill sets. Have you seen a general trend of what other skill sets the companies are actually looking for?
We've noticed that the ICT skills, which actually the Singapore government is also very keyed into.
But ICT is actually a pretty broad area where we have cybersecurity, we have data analytics, or the digital marketing, or the back-end software development. Which particular area, or it's actually just generally across the board?
We see all of those roles still being hired. Yeah. So we work with a few businesses where we actually work on site as their HR team. So we've got a really kind of an inside understanding of how it's running for those guys, and it's type of product that they need to deliver, and it's the way that their business is funded, which means all of those skills are still being hired.
I see. So now, then if you are someone who has probably heed the government's tips about developing your ICT skills, what would be your 3 tips for them to succeed in an interview to get a job within this particular field?
There are some great government initiatives for people who are not skilled in ICT. There is the Tech Skills Accelerator from IMDA, where they partner with businesses to build digital analyst skills. There's just been a program called 21st Century Digital Analyst by a company called Sparkline, where for 3 months they are actually trained in digital analyst skills. And then at the end of that, there is support to help them go out and find a job afterwards. ThoughtWorks runs a program called Jumpstart, which trains mid-career switchers in the skills of computer engineering, computer science, and agile methodology. And there are more. Trent University has a TESA program for engineers as well. So actually, if people wanted to look at how to get the skills on a government-funded initiative, which lasts 3 months, then the great news is in Singapore, there's quite a lot of ways of getting the skills. When it comes to interviews, I think for people who are perhaps interviewing in an area that they've not worked in their whole career, they really need to break their skills down. I always describe it as being like Lego bricks. So we actually help with a few of these Tech Skills Accelerator programs by helping the students to find the job afterwards. And some of them will say, I have been working as an architect and now I'm trained as an engineer. Or I've been working as a baker and now I'm trained as an engineer. So I would say, okay, so what skills have you learned as an architect, right? And there's so many transferable skills, you know, whether that's project management, whether that's negotiating, stakeholder management, how many of these skills that they can bring with them. So I always say to people, like, this isn't a new beginning. This is actually a set of new skills that you put with your old skills, and you have to work out how they can be built up into the new structure. So break it all down into Lego bricks, and you've got one Lego brick for project management, you've got one Lego brick for JavaScript, you know, and you start to say, well, what do I want to build? So if the job that I'm interviewing for involves how do I put my Lego bricks together to talk about that? So each Lego brick, in a way, if you want to talk about that skill, you could link a little case study in your mind to a time when you used that skill. I built this, or I managed this, or I achieved this outcome. And then every little skill that you've got in your head, you can prepare it with a narrative. And I really feel when you walk into an interview, having done that kind of pre-work, whatever they ask you, you're going to have quite a lot of stories and examples, real life examples, which you can run through to show them who your skills are.
Based on your training and coaching experience, what skill sets must one pick up to do well in this new economic landscape?
I've thought a lot about this because I think we've talked for quite a while about the VUCA world.
Yes.
Sort of volatile, uncertain, changeable, and ambiguous. Now, VUCA 2019 seems like you know, child's play compared to
Yes.
VUCA 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually feel like VUCA 2020 forward is always going to be up there compared to where VUCA used to be. So for me, I think the skill set that describes it all is a growth mindset. To be open to learning new things, lifelong learning ecosystem whereby we can tap into either formalized courses, sometimes it's just reading a blog and reading it to consciously think about how you would apply what you have learned reading that blog into the day or week that you're having. And for me, that's a growth mindset. It's wanting to constantly learn from what we see around us, and not just passively, but sort of taking the reins of our own learning. And
should one prepare themselves or their organization to tap on the opportunities that will present with this COVID-19 crisis?
So many problems have come up out of this pandemic that thinking about opportunities sometimes just feels like I'm not mentally ready to talk about it that way yet. We need to still be thinking like, how can I help? You know, but help and opportunity are the same sort of thing. And I need to be prepared for it. Therefore, I need to have a look into the future, which I cannot predict, and say that is what's going to be needed. You have to prepare yourself in an agile, flexible way to be able to go in the different directions. And also, they can change. And so we've actually just created some scenario planning in our business month by month till the end of the year. So if this is what June looks like, then if this is what July looks like, if this is like August looks like, because we've seen such rapid change in Singapore since January, from shock to denial to pressure back to kind of revival, you know, but we could go back there again, you know, as you and I chatted before we started the interview today, like there may be another circuit breaker.
Because of whatever that happened, a lot of your business, you pivoted it into coaching and developing a lot of IP. Could you share a little bit more?
Scenario planning, which helped us to think about what the different needs would be. So we create some shared documents, and then we brought a brainstorming team together, and we tried to create brainstorming teams of 3. We thought any bigger, then the more vocal ones take over, any smaller, then it's a bit stilted. So we created separate teams of 3, and we asked everyone to think about the phases that were coming up and what would be needed, depending on how it could look differently. And then we organized that data into, this is what the phase would look like and be called. This is what people would be feeling like in a phase like this. Because of how they were feeling, this is what they'd need. And then we said, do we already have that product available, or do we need to develop it? And then we said, and how are we going to let people know that we can do that? So it was actually quite a systematic way that we recorded the information in the end. The other thing that we did is ask everybody to sort of think about their own big goal for December the 31st, 2020. What was this year about for you? You can't avoid those questions. What do you want to be able to say about yourself and what you went through this year? And I don't think anyone projects into the future 6 months and says, I want to say that I was depressed. I want to say that I struggled. I want to say that I found it all really hard. No one wants that for their future self. Like when you think about your future self, it's natural to want something good and positive. So people say, oh, well, I want to say that I grew. I want to say that I faced some challenges, and as a result, I was a more resilient person. But when they start to think like that, they think, oh gosh, if that is how I want to be in December, like what do I actually need to start implementing? So then we asked everyone to create just a personal plan, never mind the business scenario planning. What do they want to be doing month to month in order to be that person that they envisage being in December? And that was actually quite a simple but powerful exercise, because people really owned their own narrative, and it sort of inspired them to try their hardest right now to be realistically optimistic and not allow themselves to be too pessimistic.
That's great. I think I like the idea of actually having a positive endpoint and then motivating yourself towards it. In a situation like this, right, I think especially when you're coaching someone virtually, it's not easy to coach that person from a resilience perspective. How do you go about that? Do you have like 3 or 4 simple steps that can be utilized?
The fuel which drives resilience is optimism. And optimism is the belief that you have the power to control things rather than that you are helpless. It is the belief that difficult situations are temporary and not forever. And it is also the belief that just because one thing's difficult or bad, not everything in the world is difficult or bad. So, you know, definition by Dr. Martin Seligman of optimism is exactly that. That is what optimism is. And when you are in an optimistic mindset, you fuel resilience, because it takes optimism to then combat the mind traps which occur, which eat away at your resilience. And when you're optimistic, you're actually better able to move your mind in the direction where you can make the kind of decisions and perform in the sort of way which is needed right now and which is perceived as a resilient person. Yeah. So do I have a few tips? I would say in order to increase optimism, I think people do need to have a bit of self-care. They need to be able to move their body, go for a walk, have a break, avoid burnout. They could try meditating, which allows them to choose how they respond to situations rather than just react to a situation. So just, you know, gaining that power over the mind. And if they are then able to feel more centered as a person, I think they would feel more optimistic and definitely increase their resilience as a result.
Hi, Kathryn. Yeah, so well, those were some pretty good tips that you have. I think I like the part about the resilience. It's really about optimism itself. So, but I think when somebody is on a spiraling downwards trend, how long does it take actually for them to get this message across, for you to get this message across to them?
Everybody is different. So, you know, some people, it's harder for them to kind of regain the control that they want to gain, to kind of try and spiral upwards again. And some people just have a tendency towards it as well. I mean, some people are sort of a little bit more naturally pessimistic, and they were born that way, you know, and some people are a bit more naturally optimistic and they were born that way. So, you know, everyone is actually different. But what I would say is, if somebody's prepared to talk about it and say, I think there's a bit of an issue for me at the moment, like if they're at that point where they can say just that much, what they're really saying is, I am prepared to do something about it, because I'm telling you about it means that I want you to help me. You know, you could be talking to a friend or your spouse or your parent or a coach, and you're sort of saying, I recognize that this isn't really where I want to be, and I want to get somewhere better. And as soon as they're saying that, then that's the beginning of things starting to improve, because it means that they've already themselves, they've recognized that they want to try and make things better.
That's good. So welcome to anyone who has just joined the session. Today we have Miss Kathryn Woof with us from 33 Talent. And right now we just finished the episode premiere and we're proceeding on to the live Q&A itself. So if you are coming in, please do log in into your YouTube account so that you can key in your questions. And if you're from the desktop, you can key in your questions towards the right-hand side of the screen. The chat box will be there. If you're coming in to this session from your mobile, the chat box is actually at the bottom of the screen. So, Kathryn, I think there is a question that's actually from the audience. So let me just hide this and bring up. So it's from Alan. He said, thanks for sharing, Kathryn. And then he asks, I am a fresh graduate and it is really tough even to get a job interview because of the difficult market. Any tips to up my chances of getting a job? And he followed on to say, getting a job more quickly, I mean.
Yeah. Hi, Alan. Thank you so much for writing in with a question. So I think I would say one thing, first of all, which is you're not alone. Actually, everyone who's graduating this year is going to be wanting to ask that question. So thank you for asking it, because there's, you know, thousands of people who would also like to ask that same question. I would say that I've actually been hearing about some government initiatives which are going to be working with the class of 2020, and they're looking to put them into kind of internships or training programs which may last sort of 2 or 3 months. And after they're finished, then they'll get placed into industry for maybe 6 months. It's not strictly an internship, it's a little bit different than that. They're calling it a training program. And, when you go into the placement with the company, you might just be earning a sort of monthly stipend. It's not necessarily a salaried role, but the intention really would be that sort of 9 months after your graduation, you would have received some further training and 6 months in industry, and you'd be able to look for a job throughout that period as well. So whilst you're waiting to get the job that you want, you're just continuing to develop yourself in really useful ways. So I would actually see what your university can, how they can guide you into some of these programs, because those programs, they work directly with the universities, and we're talking about huge numbers of students. There's one program that I've been chatting with a company about, which is for 10,000 students.
Wow.
So, we're talking about pretty big initiatives. And so I would definitely, Alan, just see if there's some initiatives like that you could get involved in whilst you continue to apply for a job. And aside from that, if it wasn't for those initiatives and we're just talking about how to apply for that job right now, I would actually take the time to research in an orderly way. So I'd create a spreadsheet, and I'd create, data as I'm researching about exactly where you would like to work and which department in that company. And even if they're not advertising a job right now, I think sending out a well-crafted, relatively concise sort of application to either the HR team or to the head of the department that you would be interested in, it can actually bear fruit. And that is something that I would spend my time doing right now as well if I was in your position.
Thank you, Kat, for your sharing and insights. Now, I think the other thing I would like to check with you would be, you are also a mentor actually for Techstar. And as a mentor, are you mentoring actually fresh graduates or mid-career switchers, or for someone who has been in the industry for some time?
So usually with the Techstars groups, they've been working for some time and they've decided to start a business, and Techstars has accepted them into the accelerator. So they've got down to the last 10, the most successful 10 out of thousands of applications, and then they start building their business, and Techstars supports them, and I'm one of the mentors on that program. So for those people, they're in a startup scenario, but it's often they've had no experience of doing the job which they are now doing. They've come out of their regular job to try and start this idea. So often it's an idea. It's an idea for a computer game. It's an idea for a property, something in the property industry, or something in the fintech industry, but they not necessarily qualified to do these jobs. They've just got a great idea. So Techstars helps them pull that idea together.
I see. Alan says, thank you for your advice.
You're welcome.
So now the other thing I would like to go back is, before the episode premiere, I actually asked you, based on your experience in the recruitment industry, how have you seen actually the hierarchy change over the years right now?
Yeah, I think as we do a lot of work into digital, I mean, we work into digital data and comms, but digital's almost the main thing now, because it's digital comms or it's digital data. And I think the hierarchy has changed in some ways between people looking for a job and people who are employing, because the supply and demand has just changed so much over the years. So it used to be that there was sort of people doing jobs in digital, and companies that needed to hire them, and in the usual way, job adverts were placed, people would interview for them, fine. But nowadays there's such a high demand for people with digital skills that there are not enough candidates in the market to take all of these jobs. So in some ways, one way that sort of hierarchy has changed is, I think that the job seeker has become much more powerful. So they themselves are more powerful, and sometimes with only 5 years experience in an area that's maybe niche, you could be one of the most coveted people in the whole of the Singapore market. And if there was 5 of you, all 5 of you could take a job tomorrow, but there's only one, so everyone's fighting over you. And this can be someone with only 5 years experience in their career, which is, junior to mid, but it can happen quite quickly from graduation to the point where you're sort of very much hot in demand. So I think that's one way the hierarchy's changed. Another way it's changed is within organisations. I think that digital has become much more a board level issue. So, you might be an insurance company 10 years ago, and, the people that were most important to you were the actuaries, people creating the insurance products, and then all of the sales agents selling them, HR, making sure everyone's happy, fine. Nowadays, you need to have a chief information officer, you need to have a chief digital officer, and these guys need to be thinking about completely transforming the business so that the business can get to the consumers online, on a mobile phone, and queries can be answered in a minute rather than a week by an automated function, because it's a very standard query. We don't need to have someone sat there anymore going through paperwork to find the answer. It can all be done digitally. So I think the hierarchy within organizations is that digital's really become important. Even if you wouldn't think of it as a digital business, it's insurance. Well, guess what? That's now a digital business too. And then, so I think that, that's some other ways which the hierarchy has changed. So yeah, those are the main things that I was just thinking since you asked me that question.
Thanks. Now, the other thing I was also thinking about would be when you're looking at an organization, because everybody is talking about digital transformation, right? And you did mention that the board has to be involved. Now, but if you are an SME, from your perspective, right, what is the most crucial thing? Is it from an organizational culture perspective? Is it a mindset? Or is it really just hiring someone who can do the work?
For a digital transformation?
Yes.
Yeah. So we've seen a lot of clients over the last 10 years now hire the first digital person. And this one person was supposed to be able to turn the whole business digital. And I wouldn't say that strategy has really worked out. Many of them would sometimes do okay and build a team of 3 or 4, and all of a sudden it looks like it's working. But then that person leaves after 3 years to get to a new job, and the whole thing falls down. And now that company isn't digital anymore. It was just a person who was digital running a digital team. So you just hit the nail on the head, actually, when you said it's cultural. So I think, rather than having a digital director and a digital team trying their best to make some digital aspects of the business, like the fabric of the business needs to be changed. And that means that everyone who works there already, they first need to go digital, even if it's just mentally. They need to understand that digital's coming and this is how it's going to change our business. And then they can all be thinking digital every day when they do their job. So it doesn't have to be the digital director's job to point out that that is a task which could be turned into an e-commerce sale, because if the culture is changed, then even the person who's worked there for 25 years and never done it that way before could say, I think I've seen an opportunity to take one of the processes I work on digital. And of course, then it might have to get handed over to experts. But when there's a mindset, which, it's a culture, it's a mindset, it's the way that people behave and think and act, I think the business has got a much better chance of succeeding in its digital transformation.
Thanks. Now, I think you mentioned earlier when we were chatting before we went live that your company is actually also not only just doing recruitment, but training and workshops for these companies. Is it mainly in the areas like what you mentioned in terms of helping them through the digital transformation journey as well?
It is. And but what I should say is our specialism is people. So we're not a digital transformation specialist, but what we could do is help with the people aspect of a digital transformation, which is a really important part of its success, as you just mentioned. So our workshops could be about helping teams communicate better, helping them plan better. So we could be working with the sort of soft skills around teams being successful, how to set a goal, how to effectively manage yourself and everyone around you, productivity. Other things that we train on would include delegating effectively, because a lot of managers get stuck because they're just doing everything. If only they could delegate some of that work, they'd have a little bit of time to actually think and lead. And when you're going through a digital transformation, you do want your managers to be able to lead, but unfortunately most of them end up with so much work that they don't have any time left to think about that. But then if they could delegate effectively, they could fix that problem. So we train on the sort of people side of what it takes.
I see. Yeah. So, Kathryn, we are 4 minutes away from 2:30. I would like to actually share with them how the audience who may have just come in and have missed some parts of the episodes and how they can basically contact you later. So I'll hide you for a little while and I'll share with them and I'll get back to you a little later.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So similarly, like previous episodes, you can go to effectiveagentleadership.com, click on the page on leadership during crisis, and you will see the different episodes of these series. We will have a total of 30. Today, we're already at the 27th episode. So when you scroll all the way down, you'll be able to see Kathryn's episode. And once you see the episode, you can actually click on the blue button that's there that says watch now, and it will bring you to this page here, which shows more about Kathryn. And there are 2 videos housed there. One is really the episode premiere itself. The other one, once it's edited today, we'll be uploading it, and you can click on the blue button that is shown on this page to basically rewatch the entire episode with the live Q&A, especially on the changes since we interviewed Kathryn 2 weeks ago. So then when you scroll down, you'll read more about Kathryn, as well as how you can contact her at 33talent.com. And as I mentioned earlier, there are a total of 30 episodes in this particular series. So it can be quite trying to go through every single episode to see what it is all about. So we've mounted the series actually on learning.corporatetrainerconnect.com, where when you go in there, you basically will see different kinds of courses like emotional resilience, leadership, communication, and of course the Leadership During Crisis Summit series. Now, so what's the difference between these and the previous page? This series here, when you go in, it's categorized because we have interviewed leaders who share more about overcoming their personal crisis, whether emotionally or business-wise. We also have leaders who share on leadership communication and their future strategies. So when you go in and subscribe here, it's basically more by category that you can search from. So thank you very much for staying with us till now. So let me just bring Kathryn back again. Hi, Kathryn.
Hello.
Yeah, so time really flies. It's already 2:29, about 2:30 already. And since we don't have any questions, I would like to thank everyone who has logged in and watched us so far. And thank you, Kathryn, for taking your Saturday afternoon to share your experience and insights with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Janet, and for putting this series together. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Goodbye, everyone.